It's
Whoa, they
um,
they do that now. Okay, go ahead.
cool. And yeah, so obsession with typology, but also difficulty really knuckling down my type. Um, I've yeah, I've been typed by several people
Mhm.
over the months and years, and it's yeah, it's been difficult for me to um, really lock it in once and for all. So I was hoping to get your help there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad to help. So was that primarily just in Socionics or?
It was Socionics and also Myers Briggs as well.
Okay. All
Um,
right.
yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah. So I'm ready to get started. I believe he's still fully participating. So all right. Let's see. So the first question I'm going to ask, it's a vague question. If you've seen my video, you probably know what it is. Um, it's going to be really vague, but it gives me a nice starting place. Okay. So basically, the question is, if you had to describe yourself, what's the one thing that if you didn't say, it wouldn't really be you because it's so central to who you are?
Right. Okay. And is it one word that you're looking for, or
And
just a general? Okay.
mhm.
Um, I think the first thing that comes to mind is quirky. Um, I think there generally tends to be something about perhaps it's the Britishness in me. I don't know. Tends to be a quirkiness. I'd like to think in what I would call a sense of humour. Um, I tend to I tend to come up with wacky or bizarre responses to things sometimes that can maybe sometimes throw people off a little bit, but I enjoy that side of things anyway, um, seeing things from slightly different angles. But yeah, I think the quirkiness is a strong thing I'm picking up. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So you'd say that's really close to the essence of who you are?
I guess there are myriad
That's
ways you could look at this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that's one thing that stands out to me. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing or
Ah,
necessarily even a good thing, but it's just something that I think has been an ever present, if you like.
yeah. No, I think it would probably show up in anyone's life really well to be quirky all the time. I can imagine that's a good thing. Okay.
Yeah, I might think so. Yeah.
So what other ways, because it sounded like when you said that you were, I imagined that you were talking about a lot of social situations and banter. So are there other ways that that shows up, your quirkiness?
Oh yeah, so I wasn't necessarily thinking of one particular realm or anything. It can show up in my writing or my take on things. We could, in terms of, could be talking about anything, be it politics. I think the quirkiness is. I guess I was thinking about a catch-all term that denotes thinking thinking about things in a slightly maybe offbeat manner, or perhaps ways in which others in the mainstream, whatever that means, may have considered a particular item or whatever. So doesn't just have to be the way in which I carry myself in a social situation. No, it could just be um, the way in which I respond to something, or
Mhm. Or
yeah,
your
something
view?
more intellectual, perhaps, whatever it might be. Yeah, yeah, my view. Yeah.
So you said that a lot, like your take on something, and so what do you what kinds of things or um, it sounds like you have a lot of opinions about a lot of things. So I want to know what those things are about.
Oh, blimey. Well, as many as the next person, I'm sure, but I guess we'd probably have to whittle it down. I mean, yeah, I guess I've got opinions on lots of things. I think one thing that just sprang to mind was music. I think I've got particular interest in particular types, and then I have particular opinions. But a lot of the time, I'd say they're actually, I don't know if easily swayed is the right take, but I think because I tend to think of myself as quite open-minded yet quirky, if we're staying with the quirkiness aspect, it means that um, I was trying not to be dogmatic. If you're talking about opinions in particular, um, always trying to say, well, okay, that it is still an opinion. So I think I try to refrain from being dogmatic about it if I haven't strayed too far from
Yeah.
the original question.
Hmm. Okay.
But as to
Um,
what they are, I think we'd have to explore and go down a more particular route. Because off the top of my head, I'm not going to be able to just divulge or be
yeah.
able to divulge that.
Well, I'm fine with going more particular.
Yeah.
Um, so if I mean, if there's something that you talked about recently with one of your friends or something like that, if that helps recall something specific.
Um, doesn't is it, would it have to be contentious matter or potentially no?
Anything.
Okay. Um, what's I guess I have some more, shall we say, controversial views on certain philosophical aspects, like um, and this is one thing I don't tend to be quite stubborn about. This is just going to come to my mind now. Is I don't think we have free will. So I think that's one area where, for me, I tend not to be so open-minded. It's almost like after years of having reflected upon the question, I don't. It's almost like it's a fact now. I can't stray from it. And when I've tried to tell friends about that opinion, or when I've tried to explain why I believe so, um, I don't get met with too much accord, shall we say.
People
So
like control.
people like control, precisely, and I've always said when I've tried to expand on why I think that is the case, I understand why what I presume to be the majority would say that we do have free will, because I think it's an important illusion to have. Um, it's but it's still an illusion nonetheless. That's just my take.
No, I agree 100%.
Yay!
Yeah, yeah. No, I
So I got a
agree.
question on that. I got a question on that.
Mhm.
So you started off describing it as it's basically truth after reflecting on it so long, but at the end of your statement you said, "But that's just my take." Why did you say that?
I guess I said it. I probably yeah, and a very important point you make there. I probably, in some sense, shouldn't have said it, but I think the reason I did say it is because I have a tendency often to, over the years, probably self-deprecate too much, to doubt myself too much, and to put down anything I say too much. So I think that's partly, I would say, more than anything, force of habit. Thanks for picking up on it, because I agree. Well, I would suggest that I probably shouldn't have said it at the end, but if that makes sense.
Right. So even though this thing is what you know as raw fact or raw truth, even if you self-deprecate, right, you're still perspective is you're speaking truth. So it has nothing to do with you because the truth is outside of yourself. So my question is, do you feel that you're willing to compromise truth in order to soften the harshness of it, or are you attempting to do something else?
No, no, I definitely don't want to. I want the truth, and I want to explore the truth, and I want to demonstrate, if for lack of a better word, the truth. I don't want to soften it. I think it's I think it's, if you like, almost like a bad habit that I have of softening everything I say, because I'm afraid of taking a stance too much. I think that then will be jumped upon by others potentially and say, well, you said this and this is clearly your stance, and I'm almost bringing myself to the center, to the moderate position too much. So yeah, I think it's partly force of habit.
How
It's
do those conversations go with your friends when you bring up things like free will? What is the dynamic of those conversations, and how do you manage yourself in them?
It fairly quickly turns, if not negative, it turns into fairly combative, all in good nature, I would say. No one's getting the knives out or anything to that extent. It's more that it's obviously, as Trey was alluding to, it's a very personal matter for everybody to feel that they have free will. It's important in that sense. So I think to deny them what they would perceive to be their freedom would be quite offensive to some people. But I'm very careful about whom I bring it up with, and close friends, even close friends, I would say it's still good natured, but I can sense beneath the surface that they're really not having it, and they're not happy about it as well, because of that sense that, oh, what if I don't actually have the freedom I think I have? But it always tends to end well enough, I think.
Right. Well, they're still your friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Like
I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that this is something you've put a lot of weight into and something you've reflected on for years. It's not just some idle opinion of yours. So how do you manage yourself in those conversations? Do you tend to stick your ground, or you tend to just say, let's drop the subject? What's your default position on this?
Right, yeah. I definitely stick to my guns. So I stand my grounds. I think I get to a point eventually where I feel like they're not really understanding what I'm saying, or maybe I'm not explaining myself well, or I'm getting to a brick wall. And I try my best to not tell people what all the answers are. I try and get them to think for themselves, and not just say, be all didactic and say, oh, I found all the answers and here they are, and then shove them on people. It's more that this is how I came to such. I mean, can you disprove what I'm saying? That's the first thing. Can you disprove it? And no one can disprove it. And I often repeat that. I say, I'm still yet to hear an argument in favour of free will, which actually holds any
It's
weight.
actually logical.
Yeah, which is actually logical. And then on that basis, I think it then eventually it just gradually dissipates. The conversation just wears itself thin, and I think, yeah, we all probably normally get to a point where I think we can't reach a conclusion as a group, if you like.
All right. Thank you.
So earlier you said you were having difficulty, or that you had that bad habit, right, of maybe acting like it's less than it is, or sort of not pushing your opinion out there. What other things would you say you struggle with? Because it seems like you have some areas of confidence, right? So, but I haven't seen a whole lot of where you would struggle. So, where would you say that is?
Oh God, I think this can apply in almost any kind of social setting. I think, well, just top of my head again, I think when it comes to dating, that'd be a really good example where I definitely lack confidence. I don't lack as much as I used to. That's just getting older, right? That's just maturing to some degree. I think if we take the dating example, it'd just be approaching women for me is very difficult. That's quite a common one, I think. Not necessarily conversing. I think once I've established some kind of rapport, once I have a pretext for conversing, I don't think I struggle as much. I think it's not really having a pretext for that. So a lot of social anxiety, not just related to dating, but I do have a lot of social anxiety and generalized anxiety as well. Um, I think if I, even particularly now, I know this has been recorded, whatever, if I were to say, well, I've put forth an argument and I stand by it in the moment, I mean, it's very difficult for me to be able to, even if I had the confidence to assert the statement, to make that statement, to then stand by it indefinitely. It'd be extremely rare for my confidence not to waver at some point regarding the statement, whatever it was. So I think regarding confidence or lack thereof, there's always a kind of social element to it, generally speaking, because I tend to be quite hyper aware of how I'm being perceived by others. I think that's it's definitely a bit of a catch-22. It doesn't do me too many favors a lot of the time, I don't think.
Do you feel like you don't navigate social situations confidently? At
I
least
think
when there's conflict?
when there's conflict, I think I do tend to. Well, I think I tend to navigate them a lot better than I would anticipate being able to do so ahead of time. I think I would always just assume that, oh, this is going to go wrong, then that's going to go wrong. But then when it actually happens, it's way less complicated, convoluted, or difficult than I'd anticipated it being.
Why was it difficult, or why did you imagine it to be convoluted or difficult before? What do you mean by that?
I mean that I guess I always anticipate the very worst thing that could possibly happen, and that I'll be left somehow without any control in that situation. I think control's a big term here.
That's
That's
ironic.
precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one said it was simple. Do you know what I mean? On
Wow.
paper, it's yeah, no, very good spot. Very good spot.
Huh. Okay.
It sounds like you've been through a lot, and there's a lot of changes you've made, and you recognize areas of strengths and weaknesses in yourself. Would you be willing to share a specific thing that you're very proud of overcoming in your life? Something that really challenged you or plagued you early on, and you've overcome it, or you're at least working on overcoming it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. A great question, by the way. Schizophrenia, to put it simply, and very, very difficult condition to have to contend with. In terms of overcoming it, I think largely, and this is where I do put myself down a little bit, I would say, it was mostly pot luck. Well, it was largely pot luck that I was able to overcome it, because I know a lot of other people are not so fortunate. And I have had a couple of major episodes, and I've even recently been drawn back to that kind of paradigm, that kind of I could sense that I was becoming slightly unwell even in the last year or so. I think to a degree it's made me realize there's no insight without wound, if you see what I mean, because it was incredibly powerful, and I've learned things that as long as I'm sane, I can never forget. And I think even just simple things related to that, such as the importance of looking after your physical well-being, sleep, food, etc., nutrition, whatever. These hardships have taught me so many things that I'm probably not even aware of as we speak, that will emerge perhaps, about things that I now know I recognize as I hold ever so dearly. So that was a real tribulation, I would say, that took a lot of work to overcome, thanks to lots of factors: support from my family, my psychiatrist, medications, and so on. So I'd say that's the big one for me in my life, I would say.
Well, good job on getting through that. I really feel for you there. It's a tough battle. My dad specifically has still dealt with that for over 50 years. or more. So I certainly have very close firsthand experience dealing with people who suffer from that condition, including my brother as well. So it's awesome to see that you've worked through that.
Thank you, and all the best to them as well.
Um, hmm. So, would you say that you're pretty good at coming up with practical solutions to problems?
I guess it would depend on the nature of the practical problem, but I can be, yes. Were you thinking of anything with different examples or?
Hmm. Well, you said the keeping up with your everyday environment was something that you had a little bit of difficulty with, which I definitely understand that. Um, so I'm just curious. Generally speaking, would you say that even though it's hard to keep up with your environment as far as knowing which ideas are efficient and coming up with like practical solutions, even if it's not in regard to your environment, I'm just curious if you feel like you're naturally really good at managing um, managing difficult logistic situations, maybe.
I think I'm a lot better than I used to be, particularly when it comes to logistical situations that impact myself and my um, daily functioning, or things that are more directly related to me, such as managing my daily schedule. So practical things of that nature that pertain to me and my daily life. I think where I probably struggle a bit more, I guess, would be um, practical. I don't know, it could be practical mechanical situations, like stuff that needs to be fixed around the house. I think I'm just generally quite terrible with that sort of thing, speaking apparently as well. um, so a lot of the time I will then have to heavily rely on YouTube or friends to help me out. So I think with those practical resources, I tend not to be so um, proficient, but I think that may also partly be down to upbringing as well. I don't know, but I guess it would really depend on the nature of the practical matter at hand, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
The you mentioned that I want to dig into a little bit of what you feel like you do struggle with. Where do you feel like your biggest obstacles in life are right now?
Mm. Well, confidence for sure is still a big one. So really, I'm working very hard consciously on this, but I think really standing my own ground on my own 2 feet, I think that's definitely been helped by the fact that I recently moved to my own place, for sure. So whether it's having an opinion like the free will thing we were talking about, really putting everything behind it and not being apologetic, I think that's a big thing. Whether it's about that or any other kind of matter. Um, yeah, I touched on it loosely just now, but I would say I'd I'd really like to be a bit more hands-on in the house as well, because I think this is the first time I've, yeah, as I said, properly lived on my own, and I think I don't really have an inclination towards, say, gardening or maintenance of the home, but it would be nice to actually be slightly better at those things. Much as though I'd really not necessarily give too much of a crap about those sorts of things most of the time. But that, to me, the reason I mention it is because I still feel like it's, unfortunately, whether I like it or not, one aspect of being a grown up and adult human being. Um, I think relationships as well, I'm really not, as I alluded to earlier, terribly confident with dating as well. So I think a lot of these things are confidence related. Um, I'd like to be able to apply that, well, I say newfound sense of it, increased confidence in the workplace as well, and and start really thinking about what I want, as opposed to quite often, well, either just going with the flow or what other people are doing. I think standing on my own 2 feet is really important.
Yeah, I when you mentioned the thing about free will, it reminded me of around the same time that I kind of made come to that conclusion. I would always also be in the habit of validating all behavior because it all came from the same place, right? So when you're in a place like that, it's kind of hard to tell other people they're wrong when you can kind of see the whole lineage that brought them to that point. You know what I mean? So, but don't forget you have your own lineage behind you, and it's just as valid as any other, if not more valid based on the circumstances. So, but
So do you mind if I continue the path here real quick?
say that again.
So I said, do you mind if I continue the line of questioning?
Oh, did you have one going?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, you dive into this confidence thing, which obviously is not related to cognition, but it can be. But there's a lot of things that you did mention that kind of stood out. For example, you have no interest in gardening, but you do feel the need to take care of your home. And A, I'd like more specifics on what you feel you need to be able to do around your home. And B, why do you feel that something inside your home is not as important as something outside your home?
Great question. So some examples of things I think I feel maybe I ought to be better at. Maybe I expect too much of myself, I'm not sure, but I think looking after appliances in the home, being able to know exactly what meter sits where and what function every one would have, and or what all appliances. I mean, it's not something I've ever been particularly au fait with, looking after appliances, whether electrical or not, and general maintenance of the home. I think even just knowing about cleaning products and which ones are suited for which surfaces and this sort of thing. I guess it's something that we all learn, and you don't just pull out your arse as soon as you emerge from the womb. Do you know what I mean? But that, and why do I think they're important? And particularly, I think you asked versus outside the home. Why is it more important inside the home? I guess I see the home as a reflection of the self and one's own domain, and I guess I want to know that I can keep that pocket of the universe in order. It's almost like if I can't keep this part in order, then I can almost not keep any other part, which is probably not entirely valid. But that's a thing. That's a great question. I think that's probably a large part of it, is feeling as though I've got that control, even though we don't actually have it.
Let's say that you do get to some level of confidence that you're comfortable with. What do you see your life? How do you see your life changing? What do you think will be different in your life, and what are you really aiming for here?
I think I'd be indefinitely happy. I think I would, quite simply, I wouldn't phase myself with all this negative, poisonous, noxious thinking. I think, because I actually, strangely, Damon, I had a taste of that in psychosis. When I was schizophrenic, I was actually almost temporarily, permanently happy. And because I've had a taste of it, because I've had a felt sense of it, regardless of the fact that I guess I'd lost my mind, I know what it's like. So I think that's the heaven that I would have reached or been at the center of, had I, or should I be able to attain that level of confidence. So it's a felt experience. So I think, to put it simply, I would be happy in a more, maybe happiness is slightly overused, I don't know, but it's I would feel connected to myself, and that is the first and fundamentally the most important thing. And I think, to be fair, that actually maybe answers retrospectively the previous question about the home, because if I'm there for myself, if I've got my own life jacket on before helping anyone else put theirs on, I think that the looking after the home is a reflection of that as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So,
All right, 1 second. I am trying to prevent this meeting from
oh
ending.
yeah, I've just realised. Yeah, I've just seen the yeah, because they only ask for 40 minutes or something, don't they?
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah. I'll let Trey do that, and I'll continue another line of questioning here while he's doing that. So the thing I want to kind of also dig into here is relationally, what's important to you, like with friends and family and potential partner, romantic. What's important to you? What's the things that you seek most?
I think, well, obviously connection. Well, I say obviously. I think feeling connected about things that really matter. I think when you share passions, that certainly helps. Um, I'd say two big things, maybe in terms of characteristics about things that I really appreciate in others and also myself, is one is not taking oneself too seriously. I think that's tremendously important. And secondly, I think is really caring. I think, especially as I've got older, I've really noticed that if people don't care or don't care to keep the relationship alive, that really can bug me. And I think I can sometimes feel quite hurt by that, even by close friends who may not have what I personally would have deemed kept up their end of the bargain, so to speak. Then I think that can be quite painful for me, that I've noticed. And I'm really pleased that I'm aware of that. But I'd say there are two big things, I think.
So caring, how do you, so say that somebody says they care, but their actions make you feel differently. How do you evaluate whether someone cares or not?
So I look beyond the words. I think I take a pinch of, I always take what somebody says with a pinch of salt, and I always try to correlate what they're saying with how they've acted heretofore in the relationship, and where I think there may be some discrepancy, whether I then bring it up with them and say, look, I don't think this, that, and the other. Obviously, it would take a lot for me to do something like that. But that's how I'd be aligning it. I'd be measuring what I think what they're saying with how they've acted over a particular length of time. I'm not sure if I answered the question now. I can't remember. Sorry.
No, I think you're getting down to what I'm really looking for is these things that stand out to you, right? So when it comes to a romantic relationship, what are you looking for?
Yeah, again, those 2 points still definitely hold. So definitely somebody who didn't take themselves too seriously, herself in this case. Somebody who has a kind of childlike playfulness. I think that's so that's kind of tied in with the not taking itself too seriously, and yeah, openness to trying new things, and not being afraid to admit error or wrongdoing. I think that's important for trust as well. So trust is obviously hugely important. I was in a relationship recently where a girl had been cheated on many times before by other men in the past, and as a result of that, she didn't trust me, and I didn't hold it against her. I could fully understand. Alluding to what Trey was saying earlier about understanding somebody else's how they got to a particular point in time, I understood precisely. Well, I say precisely. I understood. I had a good grasp of why she didn't trust me, even though it was nothing to do with my actions. And then I said, and so she wanted to end it, and then but later wanted to come back. And I said, look, it's not going to work if there's no trust. So I think trust is absolutely fundamental to a romantic relationship.
It's about to
Yeah.
stop. I wasn't able to fix it. There were technical issues on the back end, so I'm just gonna have to restart it.
Okay.
But let's do that now since it's about to shut off anyways, and then I'll send you both a link.
Sweet. Thanks,
All right.
man.
Yeah.
And then how are you?
Yeah. No, not a quick. It wasn't an hour yet. Um, and actually, it's my policy that if I don't feel confident, like on a type yet, I don't stop until I do. So.
Okay, we'll be here all night then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless it's not convenient, then we can
Yeah,
reconvene. But
yeah.
um,
That's good of you.
so yeah. So I do have. Were you done with your line of questioning?
For now, I'm going to
Oh,
pursue it later.
okay. So I do have some questions as far as just socially speaking. When you are around other people and they get upset about something, do you generally feel like you understand why it is they're upset, um, or what the issue is?
Yeah, I think most of the time I'd like to think so. Um, I think an example where that may not be the case is if, let's say, I've just walked into a room and there are two people. There's one, let's say, two people discussing, and one of them's really upset, and it's about something that I'm not party to in terms of the content, then
Mhm.
I'll need to be there for however many seconds or minutes to ascertain why specifically the person is upset. But in that scenario, first of all, I could determine that, for example, they weren't upset because of what the other person was doing or saying, because they weren't both upset. In this case, they were upset because they were relaying information about a third party who wasn't present. So that kind of thing, yeah, I think I'm generally fairly quick at picking up on, I would say. I hope that made sense, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, so you'd say that if someone were to like jump up and just take issue with something, um, well, how about this? How about we frame it differently? Let's say you're in a social circle with a bunch of people. Do you feel like it would be relatively easy for you to know if something would make someone, like a certain specific person, upset or not? Do you feel like you have a good gauge on that?
Uh, I would say so. I think it would be quite context dependent because obviously the more aware I am of particulars in the situation. I can give you one example where I definitely wasn't clued up, and that was one of the most bizarre instances as I think has ever occurred to me. As last year, I was at a bar. This was after lockdown had been eased slightly in the UK in terms of the restrictions for COVID. I was I was basically at this bar and I was just popping out for a cigarette. I don't smoke anymore, thankfully. But um, as I was leaving to just pop outside the bar, there was a chap randomly came up to me and said, "Hey mate, just let you know if you see a group of guys going from this way to that way and not the other way, which is a bit strange, uh, just let me know or whatever." And I thought, yeah, okay, cool. And then lo and behold, I saw a group of guys outside, and I don't know if he'd said "let me know" or "let them know" or whatever, but I presumed, oh right, well, this guy, because he said specifically, "I'm just going to the toilet." So I thought, well, this guy obviously wants me to let them know that his friend has gone to the toilet. So I then came outside, and then I sort of engaged this as a group of lads there, and I just said, "Oh yeah, your mate's just gone to the toilet. He'll be out in a sec." And it's like, what are you talking about? And at that point, just like all of a sudden, I was just like jolted by what was like feelings of aggression in the air. And then before I knew it, another guy just punched me in the jaw, just out of nowhere. I didn't even see the guy. I just saw in my peripheral vision there were three guys, and one of them just punched me. And I was like really massively taken aback. I was like, "What the fuck's going on here?" And then they left. And
Still
then
wondering what's going
I
on.
still wonder what was going on. And because, and this is the weird shit I think about quite a lot, but because I'd presumed that my friend had witnessed this through window and not done anything about it, that it was quite normal for a random guy to just randomly punch another guy he didn't know or had any contact with whatsoever in the face. So I then just proceeded to just smoke. And then I just stood there, and then the three guys then came back, and I thought, oh no, this guy's going to try and lump me again. And he did, but the second time I managed to turn my head slightly so he didn't catch me full on. And then I only realized later on, or I only found out, sorry, later on, that the guy who told me, let me know, I'd actually had a problem with this guy all day because he was some kind of drug dealer, and he'd been just causing havoc at the bar. And because this guy, it turns out, worked at the bar. So he was warning me, but it was just so poorly expressed on his part that I almost just fell for a trap I didn't know existed, that it wasn't really a trap. So that's the one example, I think, where generally I'm very aware of my own safety and what is likely to make people angry and this, that, and the other. But because by some minor bad stroke of luck, on this occasion, I had no idea about the pretext or what was happening beforehand. I fell hook, line, and sinker, pretty much literally for that. I don't know if that helps illustrate, but that's just one exception where I was just absolutely terrible at picking up on the. Obviously, I wasn't to know on the
Yeah.
nuance of why somebody might be aggressive towards me. But normally, I'd be ahead of time. I'm quite aware of people's emotions, or
Oh,
particularly how they are towards me a lot of the time.
yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a crazy story, I gotta say.
Yeah.
um, so let me see here. I had something else. Um,
I hope it helped, by the way.
yeah, no, it was good. So let's say that let's say that oops, something came up. Man, I lost it again.
How's your job?
Oh, right. It's yeah, it's fine now. I mean, my first thought was, have I lost any teeth? And luckily, I didn't lose any. But yeah, no, thanks for asking. It's all good now.
All right,
Yeah.
I've got it now.
All right.
Oh,
I was
sorry.
going to continue that line of questioning, but we're good.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and do this one, and then you can take over. So the question is, if you had to imagine someone that you, this could be a real person, or it could be, you know, someone made up, but if you had to imagine someone that you really admire but know you could never be yourself, what would they look like?
Hmm. I think the reason I'm hesitating is because I don't know if I've. This sounds really wanky, and as though I'm sort of. I work for some kind of. I work for Nike or something.
Go
Where
on.
I'm in a Nike ad, but there's. It almost feels as though there's nobody I haven't been in terms of having encountered that person, whether in a Disney film or whether even you. I don't know. That sounds absolutely awful, but
You mean you
I,
don't know what that person would look like?
I don't know what that person would look like, because I think I have the capacity to be as much Adolf Hitler as Mahatma Gandhi or Princess Diana. Is that making sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And to that extent, anybody I've
But
encountered and assimilated.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that you admire that are a little bit closer to who you are already, right? Like if I think of Mahatma Gandhi, I would say myself that I feel like I'm not Gandhi, right? But I would say that I'm probably closer to Gandhi than say Hitler,
I'd
right?
hope so.
Yeah. But having the ability and power to make things happen and to rally the people and all of those things, that's something that I do admire about Hitler, right? So just as an example, right? But the question just being, what kind of things would that person be good at? What kinds of things would you look at and say, man, that is really tough for me to do,
Okay.
but that right there that's cool. I wish I could do that.
Yeah, I think the point still stands in that because I don't know necessarily who or what I could become
Hmm.
for both positive or negative reasons. I can't rule anything out necessarily in that sense. But what I would say to that is if we're asking the here and now, right this second, what things do I struggle with, and therefore what things do I associate with? What of those things do I associate with somebody currently who doesn't struggle with those things? Um, I would say it would have to be somebody who um, didn't lack self confidence about, say, I guess. We may need to revisit this one if that's all right, because I'm struggling to come up with any particular individual.
So let me ask you this, and we can get back to this question. But my question is, do you really believe that you have the same capacity as becoming Hitler as you do Princess Diana and Gandhi? Do you
Um,
really truly believe that?
I don't believe, given my, I would say, luck, I would say that I don't believe that I currently have the same capacity to become one versus the other on each side of the scale, if you like. But I'm just saying that I can't necessarily rule out becoming one or the other.
Why? What would it take to rule it out?
I don't think you could necessarily. I don't think you could.
Okay, so you're leaving the possibility open that you could. It would be a series of circumstances which could craft you into one or the other based on what you're exposed to.
And this is the crux of the free will argument that I was trying to get behind earlier, and it's precisely why it's potentially very controversial and people don't like it.
I'm not even challenging the controversy. I'm
Okay,
trying to get to the root of
that
where
is
this
it.
stems, right? So the question is, if you know yourself, do you have a depiction of this is who I am and a sense of self, right? What your principles and your sense of identity is. Do you have that?
I don't have a sense of self because I don't think you can find the self. The self isn't a fixed thing. It's a dynamic, fluid concept. You don't ever pin it down. It's like you're trying to find a subject by making it into an object, which is an impossibility. So no, I don't have a sense of self in that sense.
All
And
right,
I would
right there.
presume
That's what closed it for
That's
me.
that's
It was
that's what I yep, that's what I wanted to hear.
yeah, that's exactly what closed it for me. Yep.
fair enough.
That I was juggling two types for a while, and you just went
Oh,
whoop.
really? Oh, right. Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating.
All right.
Yeah,
Were you
you just
juggling two
cleared
types
the
as
poops
well?
there. Yeah, I have two types.
Yeah. Surprising two types, right?
Yeah, there's two types that I'm wrestling with, so I'll let Trey carry it away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was thinking between ILE and IEI,
Right. Okay.
right? Um, I feel like from the very get go, you said a lot of things that would or why did I say controversy? Would normally make someone think ILE, right? All this focus on novelty and on ideas and banter, it just uh, seemed very ILE. It sounded like someone who really focused a lot on ideas and um, and maybe even how they interact with other people and the effect they have at the beginning, at least. That's what it seemed like. But then as we went on, you kept talking about your position on things, and then you mentioned free will. And this is where I started to relate to you a lot because I had that exact same point for myself. And I'm not sure if you know, I am an IEI myself, right?
Yeah.
So when I was talking to you about that, I was seeing a lot of the issues that I had to sort of um, create rationale for. Like being able to come to the stance where I feel comfortable positioning myself over someone or negating their position, because in my eyes I can see how time has led us to the same point, so I can see where we're all coming from, and it makes sense that we're all here. So how does it make sense for me to override you, right? um And so I related to a lot of that. But as we kept going, um, some of your some of the things that are just more so about your character and where you've come from were starting to present themselves, so that it got a little bit harder to differentiate with certain things. For example, um, you seem to have a little bit of anxiety around relationships, right? Whereas generally an IEI is going to have a really easy time recognizing um, or navigating relationships, right? And so I think that when I started to dig a little bit more, I started finding out that generally speaking, you know how people are feeling, and you know where they're coming from, and that's FI and that's NI. I mean, you seem to have a pretty good grasp on that, and you knew how to navigate those situations. It didn't sound like a struggle for you. Maybe just some of the confidence related issues that you kept mentioning might get in the way of that sometimes, right? Um, but I think when I asked you about practical issues, your answers kind of left it left a little bit of ambiguity, right? So when we got into the end there and you really started diving deeper in the concept of self, it seemed pretty clear uh, that you were definitely an IEI, right? I mean, for one, I feel like that's that whole. It's difficult being an IEI because you have to. That sense of practicality isn't there. It's about being logically correct, right? Does everything make sense? Does everything line up? And so sometimes the most practical things in the world are the most illogical just in a framework sense, right? Some of the things that we might do seem like they make sense, but they're actually just relative, right? So I think that that presented itself a lot in what you were talking about. I think another aspect that I see with FI demonstrative um, is that people who have the demonstrative element, or like IEIs that have it in, as FI, those people generally tend to recognize really clearly how people instill their logic with values, right?
Mm.
And so what that does, in effect, is IEIs are usually more aware of that. And so when people make logical arguments, they kind of see that it's not logic, and they're like, you're just, you're partial to this, right?
Mm.
And so it's really easy for an IEI to subtract all of the emotion and all of the personal sense of self that someone put into their logic until there's nothing left and you're just purely logical, right? And it has nothing to do with the individual. Um, and that is why you get to that point where it's really hard to define this. I mean, you're looking at things from clear, like such a uh, distilled version of what it is, that it's kind of hard to see it from a subjective point of view anymore, right? Does that make sense?
It does. It
Those
does.
were a lot of themes I think that came out that kept telling me I, but for a while there, it wasn't abundantly clear until you got into the end.
So my journey was different and unique, but I started off with ILE, and then I started thinking ILI, but I saw the heavy TI, and I was like, this guy, I think he values TI. So I started going back to ILE. Then I was like, okay, now he's starting to sound like an IEI. And when I started going, and I was like, okay, this is actually, the ILE is getting ruled out. And let me walk you through some of the observations that made the most sense, right? First off, there's this desire to become more confident or capable, right? And it seems to be a very overarching goal for even people who don't, IEIs that don't suffer from, anxiety, they still want to be more capable and confident. This is a general theme amongst IEIs, is the feeling of being more capable in the world. And this is a way that they compensate for their lack of TE, but also for their desire to have more SE in their life. They're more push, the more ability to get things done, be more practical, be more functional. This is a thing that they strive for quite a bit. yet it's over very selective things. It's very particular, and it's not just a wide variety of being good at everything. It's usually very particular things for particular reasons, and those reasons are justified by introverted logic. So there's a system or a practicality behind why I have chosen these specific things to enhance my abilities or strengths in. What I didn't hear from you at all was any TE whatsoever. So there was no extroverted logic pretty much in anything you've said at all. So I knew that ILE was just not even a possibility. Neither was ILI, and it started getting ruled out. But I still wanted to probe a little bit and figure out and dig deep. And I was like, maybe ILI's there. He's just, we haven't got to her. Maybe I asked bad questions, and I'm going to have to refine how I'm asking these questions. But there was some sense of FI, and I said, okay, I see the FI. There's definitely some FI here, especially when you were talking about relationships, bonds, and actions matching up with words and making sure that there's a congruency there. So there's some FE and FI. I said, okay, that doesn't really support ILI as much. There was also the big thing when it came to particular sense of self, right? And when an ILI would never dream of becoming something they deem as evil. And they would see that as an absolute incapable thing that could never happen, right? Because there's a very strong moral stance with those who are in the gamma quadrant. And it's, you're a piece of shit or you're not a piece of shit. And most of them would agree that Hitler was a piece of shit. And to say that both are likely outcomes for you based on the course is a surrendering of FI to a higher position, right? It's something is taking precedent over it. And that was NI. And it was NI and it was also TI. It's understanding how things come together and ultimately can affect the outcome. And you surrendered your concept of FI, your sense of self, to this greater whole, which you will see very often in IEIs and their personification of how they identify who they really are, right? They usually reach this point where there is no sense of self. And the answers were very abstract and meta. There was not a lot of concrete anything provide. Any questions were very difficult to find specifics. And, asking for specifics, it was very difficult. This is a very SE sensory thing. So that demonstrated a very low sensory preference, which to me was right off the bat. I was like, okay, this guy's heavy on NI. And I knew that. I was like, okay, there's lack of specifics, right? What kind of guy gets punched in the face once and continues to smoke a cigarette, gets punched in the face again, and reflects on why he's getting punched in the face? What kind of guy would do that? And I had to ask myself, what type out of all 16 types? That would be IEI. Why is this happening to me? I wonder what's really going through this guy.
Here?
Yeah, what got me here? What's going through this guy's mind? I wonder
what
if I
got
said
this guy
something.
Here?
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else would have beat the shit out of this guy. But you're over here thinking, I'm like, okay, you got punched once and you just smoked a cigarette and then you got punched again and you were reflecting on why this had happened. And I'm like, there's only one type that's going to do that. And that is the IEI, right? And there's very strong nuance in your FI, right? So it's obvious that you understand dynamics that I don't even comprehend. You explain situation. I'm like, wow, that's actually a really good observation when it comes to people how people interact with each other. I don't have good at FI at all, so it's very hard for me to pick up on those things. Where for you, it was like, yeah, that's obvious, or I can definitely draw conclusions from that situation. But there wasn't this high urge or preference or this strength or anything on it. It was like, I know this, but it's not really important. You always deferred off to what was more important. You're like, what's really important here? And you would go back to something else. It was like a kind of a obvious, and this is what we call your demonstrative, right? It's just constant. All right, you're throwing it around, but you don't really value it. And so for you, it's like, everybody should already know this. It's kind of obvious. And yet everybody doesn't, but it feels that way. And you were saying, I can kind of pick up on what's going on without even talking to these people. If I saw somebody yelling at somebody across the table and getting upset, I would straight up walk up to the person and, why are you upset? Like, what's got you bothered? What's the deal? Like, and for you, it's like, I can inference that it's going on. And I depicted that it was a third party in this. And I'm like, damn, that's actually pretty impressive. I wouldn't have done that. Right. So some of these things show strength in these cognitive perceptions that you're picking up, and yet when you surrendered yourself FI, that showed lack of value for FI. It really ruled everything else out. In IEIs often have a hard time, especially male IEIs, because they tend to be heavier on logic. And this is just a common theme that I've observed, and it's anecdotal. There's no statistics that support this, but this is something that I've observed, and I believe Trey can validate this as well, is kind of how our society is. It's, there's a lot of pressure on being more logical for males, or at least there was, people around our age. And as a result, you get more of a logical slant. So there's a lot more TI. And I definitely picked up on the TI, the structuring and how you see things need to be organized and ordered, and they have to make complete sense before you begin to adopt them. And there's kind of a stubbornness to it. And like, oh, well, you're not really proving this. You're not really validating this. You're not really making, and it's this need to debate, yet there was no actual TE. It was, you've gained your knowledge through timeless reflection. Let me just put it that way. Does that make sense, Simon?
It does. I just had a couple of quick questions, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Shoot.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you very much both for your descriptions, illuminating and humorous at the same time, and definitely reveals a lot. I mean, I've struggled many years trying to knuckle down my type, and the first question is related to the fact that most people who have typed me, not all, have determined that I've favoured NE over NI, and normally that would be as auxiliary NE, such as INFP, INTP. Can you understand why that might be the case, why they may have seen that or possibly picked up or thought that I'd favoured NE consciously in that sense over NI?
You said, what was the part you said about the auxiliary?
They
Sorry,
think you either LII or you're
yeah, so
EII.
LII or EII.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I'm mixing up systems there.
Yeah. Yeah, I have something to say about that. So, well, with I think one of the main things that people might miss, that's a common thing to miss, is the demonstrative and its role in a type. I'll admit, I didn't even really think about. I didn't even really give as much attention as I should have when we were in our interview on TE. I guess one thing I forgot that's critical to evaluating whether someone has TE is how specific they get, right? Because when you're looking at the difference between TI and TE, TI is a generalization. It's a, if I say something that has certain properties and I describe it, right, but I leave it open-ended, I don't point out a specific situation, that's TI. I'm using TI to circumscribe parameters, right? Whereas TE is always about specifics. It's about specific instances, and et cetera, et cetera. So when you see an ILE, especially, they're going to use a lot of specifics. I notice this in SLEs and ILEs. They will, when they're trying to explain a concept, they will bring in specific situations, maybe even historical data that backs up what they're saying, right? Whereas I don't know about you, but personally, I don't feel like I have a large. I don't think I have a lot of access to large amounts of information regarding. I usually forget that very quickly. I forget. Okay. I used to be in a relationship that made me realize that I actually remember generalizations more than I do specific instances. And what I mean by that is that she would say, I would tell her, "Oh, you always do that," and she would be like, "Name one time." And I know that she's done it several times, but I could not remember one other scenario where she had done that thing. So, um, I've noticed that myself, and when we did the interview with you, I didn't see any specifics. I saw a lot of descriptions. I saw a lot of logical explanation to sort of give rise to a sense of what you were referring to, but not actually telling us uh, much specifics or much data to back up what you were saying, right? It's sort of like your own distilled conclusions.
So can I answer
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, Simon. So my answer to your question in the shortest way possible is when most people type people, they look at an archetype and they look at the whole picture versus the details that build up, right? And it's easy to mistake you for an LII or an EII. I can say that right off the bat, right? You have a warmth to you. You have a sense of your affect is very comfortable, and it can make people comfortable. I can see why you may have a lot of friends, or if you don't, you probably just need to get out more and make some, because you got a very good warmth to you, right? Where I think that people can pick that up and they're going to say, okay, well, he's EII, he's introverted, right? And so they see the introversion and they will assume that any has to be in the second slot because you can either be an LII or EII.
The question was about any, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I gave you a
smart,
T breakdown.
Yeah.
I was like,
So
take this or leave it.
you're a smart guy, right? So naturally there's an assumption that because you know things and understand things that you must be TI heavy and NE auxiliary because you're an LII, and LIIs are smart guys, right? And yet there's that warmth to you. So some people go, you know what, you're just a smart EII. And this is the way that most people type. And it's not, it's the wrong approach. And it does have some validity to it because archetypes do work to an extent, right? My very first initial gut impression was LII because of your affect, right? But then I saw the other side and I started thinking ILE. My LI impression was like 5 seconds long. But I've learned to ignore those archetypes right off the bat, because what you find is when you explore a human being, there's themes that last a lot longer than one's affect in any given moment. And those themes really clue into someone's life, right? And so that's why we rely on the questioning and digging deep and finding out what's really going on in someone's mind versus just relying on an archetype. Being on camera, being on, talking to different people and responding to questions that may be personal can all affect affect. So the NE and the auxiliary is by force, right? They see the TI like I did, and they go, okay, well, there's heavy TI and he's introverted, so he can either be LSI, but there's no SE, so he must be NE. And they've just picked that, right? I call this lazy typing, and it's easy to do, but there's so much missed, and that's the reality behind why you couldn't be NI because you're TI. That's why, right? And so by force, they have to say, well, you're NE. But if you really dug into it and say, why do you see NE auxiliary? They probably couldn't give you a really solid answer, because everything you were doing in this conversation was taking beads and putting a string through all the beads, and they had to connect, right? You were not just pulling at random things out of thin air and just going, okay, these things have to fit, but I don't know how to fit them. Or if I did know how to fit them, that wouldn't be as important as, like stringing them all together. So ultimately, I'm not going to expand on this because I find it kind of irrelevant. What's most important is the underlying theme here, and going back down to the ultimate thread that's linking all these things together. Not that ILEs don't do this or LIs don't do this. It's just not valued. It's dismissed like you dismissed FI. It's picked up. I see what you're talking about, but it's really not important. What is important is valued function. Right. And so that's why by force people are putting you in the category of NE, but that's not it would be very unsubstantiated if you were to actually dig down and try to dig into that particular information element.
That's such a good answer. And actually, you made me realize that every single time I got typed as an extroverted intuitive of some sort, I remembered that it was stated as though it were just a given and that there wasn't even a need to question it. And because I think presumably I'd also assumed that I was an extroverted intuitive because of I actually meander a lot. My thoughts tend to go hither and thither and I get lost in these rabbit holes. But it's as though, well, then I must be an extroverted intuitive in that sense, and I can't be an IEI. And then I realized, well, actually, who's to say that IEIs don't definitively do this? And why did I not question? I mean, the question was always, was I FITE or was I FIT? Was I FITE or was I FETI? And my the preponderant nature of my musings were always on that specific aspect, the judging axes, and it was never about. I just readily assumed, I think, because I thought so, and all the people who typed me just assumed that I was an extroverted intuitive as well. So it was a given. And what you said there, Damon, was just so illuminating. It's almost like you almost knew, without realizing it, what had actually transpired in a lot of the other sessions as well for me. So that's thanks a lot for that. I did also want to know if you'd both happy suggesting that in my case it also would translate to INFJ as well, or do you not have an opinion on that?
My opinion is I don't subscribe to MBTI because, you know, I'm an MBTI master practitioner. So I've done a lot of study in this stuff. I've spent years researching it. And the reality is MBTI is based on test answers. And the test is pretty valid as far as taking quality tests, sure. But ultimately, they're starting to dismiss the cognitive theory and move more into tightening up the test. So it's based on the I versus E and N versus S and T versus F and J versus P, right? So then they just string the letters together based on the dichotomies. Now, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's really at its core. We're getting down to looking at dichotomies versus actually looking at information metabolism and looking at cognitive arrangement. So I wouldn't take you down that road because I'm not confident in it. I think it's best to really just subscribe to Socionics and understand that, you know, you get much more fulfilling interpersonal dynamics from Socionics, which MBTI has sort of left out.
I completely agree, and I'm pleased you gave. I thank you for saying that. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah.
I will say, as far as what you were commenting on for IEIs, I've noticed that when you're working with an element, any element, it's either going to be working in tandem with the one or the other from the same axis, right? So if we're talking about NI, it's either going to be an operation with SE or it's going to be an operation with NE. Okay, so notice that there was a point where you were referring to where everyone was in time, right? I mean, if you think about physically where everything comes from, then you can kind of trace it back to the origin point and say, well, free will doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? That's what you're doing there is you're taking sensory information and you're tracing it back in time, right? But there's another usage of NI that is correlated with NE. And it's still related to time somewhat, but not necessarily in a straightforward sense. A better way to think about it might be like the NE, there's a dichotomy in socionics called objects and fields, right? So if you think of NE as idea objects or perspectives, then NI is the field between them. So what you'll notice is that when you're exploring these ideas, you may have different ideas come up, but you're more interested in where they connect.
Yes.
Right? And that is what makes an IEI what they are, is they're chasing fields, right? The number of times that I mean, brought these totally different things and connected them together like perfectly is insane. And that's one of the biggest traits of IEI. So you will have a lot of ideas that you will chase and you will see a lot of different ones, but it'll always be about stringing those back together and finding where they merge.